Yay. Hi.
Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to be, like, truly so honored that you would do this with me.
Oh my god, it's my pleasure.
When I read your memoir, and then I was like, I'm gonna reach out on Instagram, like, you know, this is the world that we live in where we can reach out on Instagram. Okay, so you guys, this is Gabrielle Korn, writer, all the things. Okay, let me try and like give like a little breakdown into who you are,
Yeah,
and then you
please.
can correct me if I'm like wrong.
Sounds good.
The youngest editor-in-chief at Nylon. You have since written a memoir called Everybody Else is Perfect. You've written 2 sci-fi books, one that came out last December, one that's coming out this December. Yours for the Taking is the first one, and then the next one is called The SHUTOUTS, which is the second book in the trilogy. You have bylines in Coveteur, In Style, Nylon, Oprah, Refinery 29, and you're just a badass. You're so cool.
Thanks.
Okay.
That was great. You did
Yeah,
it.
did I?
Okay,
Okay,
my
good.
publicist.
Can we start a little bit, like, talking about the memoir?
Totally.
Only because it is literally what I read that made me, like, become obsessed with you.
Thank you.
It really is about your time as editor-in-chief at Nylon. And there's, like, a lot of good, bad, and ugly parts of all of that. So when I was, like, thinking about, like, crafting this with you, I was like, oh, there's so much to talk about. Like, where do we even start? I thought we could, like, just use some of your words, actually. So I have some thoughts for you. On page 5, you wrote this. I realized, and this was after you had left Nylon, but you were like, I realized that without my fancy title, I didn't know how to describe myself. And really the question for all of us is this. As a new generation of women, how do we recognize ourselves and each other without the pressure to be perfect, however that's currently being defined? I read that on page 5, and it like struck such a nerve in me that I teared up. Because I think we so often like connect our worth and our value to our job and our job title.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I think it's like, it's a question I don't have an answer to yet, which is like the funny thing about writing a memoir in your 20s, which is what I did.
Yeah.
Like,
I love it, yeah.
More questions than answers.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I was someone who always had a job that was the first thing that I would say about myself to people.
Totally.
And I think that's true for a lot of us, especially when it's something you've worked really, really hard for. But like, I think the lesson we all learn eventually is that the job isn't ever going to love you back. And so when it eventually breaks your heart, because like we all exist under capitalism and therefore we'll all inevitably get fucked at some point, it's like you have to be able to know who you are without it. And I think in hindsight, like sometimes it feels like another person wrote the memoir, because I think the truth was I was so kind of fearless and felt really confident in my convictions and in the way I stood in my principles instead of like holding on to jobs at all costs. And now I'm like, well, actually, it would be really nice to have a job.
Yeah.
You know, like I wonder how things would have been differently had I done different things. But it was also like a pandemic release, so I haven't really like talked to that many people in person about it because all of my events were virtual. I didn't do a tour. Like, it feels very far away now. So all that is to say, even hearing you read it to me, I'm like, oh, that does sound smart.
Yeah, no, it's so smart. It's so smart, but it does feel like almost like a different you. Yeah. Like it was a different version of you.
Totally. It was a version of me that hadn't yet really gotten like, you know, treated as poorly as I was going to get treated at work.
Interesting. I think like what I first like really fell in love with and like why I was so drawn to it was just your earnest and honest conversations about your push to promote body positivity and inclusion in a way that I think that industry like desperately needed and probably still needs a lot more of. So when you look at your time at Nylon, like even though it was hard and like you ended up leaving that world, like what are you most proud of like when you look back on that made that all worth it?
I mean, I'm proud of that.
Yeah.
Like, I'm proud that I had a vision of what nylon could mean to people, and that like I stuck to that.
Yeah.
I think my team did a really good job. I'm really proud of like the people that I gave opportunities to.
How did you know that like we needed that, or how did you even know how to push for that and like what that looked like?
Yeah.
Because like that's a big bold move to do in your 20s when this was like an established magazine and like the industry really was just pushing, like you talk about this, white, straight, cis, tiny, thin women, right?
Yeah.
So like this was a big departure from that, but like that would have been a big bold thing to do and to know to push for.
I think that people were really ready for it.
Yeah.
Like it was only a risk in that the magazine hadn't really done it yet, but it wasn't a risk in terms of what I knew people wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like because I was young and because I was part of the audience that we were supposed to be for, I just, I knew that it would work. And I was also like young enough to not be that scared.
Yes. Like having that on your side and not really knowing fully what you're up against.
Totally.
Or like being a little naive in that way.
Exactly.
Probably was helpful.
Yeah.
It was like the early 2010s, right? So like this is like the time of social media where it became all about clicks and likes, and it still is obviously, but you got to actually get feedback in real time about what people wanted to see versus, when I was growing up, like I don't know, like we just read magazines and like who knew what we really liked or wanted.
Totally. And magazines would just interpret the data of sales. There are reasons that the industry stayed how it did, but it wasn't really reasons that reflected how people actually felt.
So true. And actually that makes me think about another thing they wrote down. So you said now, though, the stories readers click on the most are the ones that subvert that oh-so-privileged, thin, white, straight, cisgender identity. And in fact, the most popular image from my last New York Fashion Week at Nylon was a photo of a black woman with a bedazzled prosthetic leg. It got over 6,000 likes within 2 hours. Young women are so supportive of each other's differences that I get the chills thinking about it. No matter where my career takes me, my plan is to inundate the world with beautiful differences to celebrate until we all have the strength to turn that support inward, or until it just seeps in like osmosis, counteracting everything we previously absorbed and accepted as true. Okay, I feel like there's so much to discuss here. It just must have been so satisfying to see that that was the photo that got all the likes.
It was amazing.
Like,
it was so great. And this was also like during like Trump's presidency. And so, like, I think everybody sort of realized at once, if we don't do these things to make the world the place we want to live in, no one's going to do that. Like, you just all of a sudden realized, just the differences culturally in the country, and like that you couldn't just assume that people cared about the things that you cared about. And totally. I don't know, like I think I got really lucky with the timing. Not lucky that Trump was president, but lucky that I was in a position of power at a time when people wanted to see the things that I cared about.
Yeah. So many of the women that I talked to who were doing just such great things, it was like that moment in our history and time in the political sphere is what took them to the next level to really push, other initiatives and agendas that we so desperately needed.
Totally. It was like there was nothing we could do about Trump being in the White House. So I think we all felt like we had to do something.
Yeah. Put that energy into something that could maybe change things.
Yeah.
But it was also, okay, so another part of that I loved so much is just the idea that this younger generation really is so accepting of these differences and like helps push us in the direction that we really should be going. Mm-hmm. So do you feel like we're still going in that direction? Or do you think it's like become a little stagnant? And like, do you think it's real or it's performative?
I don't know. And I think it's really complicated. And like, when I look at Gen Z, I think they have the reputation as being like the activist generation, but I don't necessarily think they have less eating disorders statistically. Right. And like their celebrities kind of look just like how our celebrities looked. And so, you know, it's hard to parse out. And like, and then I left editorial to work in entertainment for a couple of years, and I got to entertainment, and it was like, oh my God, you know, like this industry is probably 15 years behind where like New York media is in terms of like the basic lessons to be learned about representation and
Yeah.
like, you know, marginalized stories and
Yeah.
etc. So
Yeah.
I go back and forth with what I think about it, but I think I get frustrated when it feels like people are sick of this conversation and have moved on when the issues haven't been solved yet.
Totally.
You know, so like there's always backlash. Like there was backlash to Me Too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like after the Black Lives Matter movement during the pandemic, like all of these amazing Black women got put in positions of leadership, and then like a few years later, like or like losing their jobs. You know, it's like there's always like a push and pull.
Okay. Really fast, too. The hypocrisy part of it.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about that, because that's obviously like in the title or the part of your book, like
Mm-hmm.
what specifically are you referencing?
Oh, that's a good question. It's not just one hypocrisy, I think. Let me see. When I wrote the subtitle, what was I thinking of? I mean, I think I was thinking of like my own hypocrisy in terms of like fighting for women to be treated a certain way and then accepted being treated really poorly myself.
Yeah. Because you talk about that a lot with like your female bosses, which was like a disappointment. I think that you said like such a severe disappointment. Like you think you're going to get in this position and have like a female boss and be like treated the way that we hope and expect to be. And you said in most circumstances they were like as bad as male bosses.
Totally. So it was like,
what do I do with that information? When I saw that, I was like, this is so alarming and upsetting.
I mean, I think the problem is like, I don't know. I think it's so rare to find someone who's attracted to the idea of leadership for like, you know, good reasons.
Right.
Like, so I struggle with that. And then also just from like a capitalism perspective, it's like, even if you are doing all of this good in media, which so many people are, and so many people have like worked so hard to make media better for people, at the end of the day, it's just going to some guy's bottom line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know?
And you still have to make money off of it.
Yeah.
So if like pushing these ideals, like, is it making money, right? Like, they'd scrap it.
Right.
Because they would have to.
Right. Totally.
Yeah. Oof, that's dark.
I know. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yep. It seems like we're making progress in one way, but it's still, there's the other side of it, which is dark and unfortunate.
Yeah.
Do you feel better about where we're going, or?
Sometimes.
Yeah. But then other days you're like, this still sucks.
Yeah. Other days I'm like, none of it matters because we're all going to die in a climate change disaster.
Okay, well, on that note, let's get to your next book.
I know. Welcome to Talking to Me.
So when you describe this book to people, what would you tell them?
I say it's a climate change dystopia about like a near future world where the government selects people to live within weather safe structures, and this like villainous girl boss figure decides to only allow women into the one in New York City, and then chaos ensues.
That's great. And that's called The Inside Project.
Yeah.
Okay, so much to unpack. So, just so you know, I read Yours for the Taking last week in 2 days, and it just so happened to be like the hottest days on the East Coast. It was like 98 degrees.
And it's like, was it the hottest day, or was it like part of the coolest summer moving forward?
Exactly. Like, is this the coolest day that we will ever have again?
Yeah.
As I was reading this, I was just thinking about sci-fi in general, and I feel like there was a point in time where the current reality, like if you were reading sci-fi felt so far in the future that there felt like there was space, right? And now when we're reading about sci-fi, because of how quickly, like how exponentially quickly our world is changing, it just feels like that world of sci-fi is so much closer, which like makes the anxiety of the read much more severe.
Yeah.
And it's terrifying, but then I'm like, we can't run away from the anxiety of this. Like, the truth is climate change is happening, and I was like living in the moment and reading it, and I could this world doesn't seem that far away, and it feels plausible.
It's
like,
not
it feels terrifying.
It's a near future.
Yeah, and it's supposed to be in 2050, but like, that's literally 25 years away. Like, we will still be alive, hopefully, in that day, and this could be our world. Like, it felt that real to me. Climate change.
Yeah.
Has that always been something that's a huge interest to you?
So, I've always been anxious about it, but I honestly didn't realize how much anxiety I had about it until I had the idea for this book and just started writing it. Like, it wasn't like I sat down to write a climate change book. It was like I sat down to write a book, and that's what came out of me.
Right. So you're like, oh, this has been like living in my subconscious for a very long
like,
time.
Oh, I guess I'm worried.
Yeah. You're like, I'm a little stressed.
Yeah.
Okay, but so climate change is the vehicle, I feel like, of the novel, but it still comes down to these, like, women and their stories.
Yeah.
And a lot of the themes that you talked about in your memoir are revisited here.
Yeah, I mean, authors like to say that we all just write the same book over and over again.
Right. But, I mean, it's so different, but, like, those themes are very much alive. Mm-hmm. What are the other things and issues and themes that were, like, most important to you to get across in this one?
I was really interested in power dynamics.
Yeah.
I was interested in, like, toxic femininity.
Yeah.
And I was interested in questions about who deserves to survive and who gets to decide that.
Yeah. Let's talk about the toxic femininity. Was that a hard thing to write about?
No, that came first.
Really?
Yeah.
Because of your experience in the world of media? Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's also such a hard thing, I would imagine, like, being a feminist and being somebody who is, like, so supportive of, like, women and all these things. Like, I think we don't always want to acknowledge that maybe that toxicity exists. Like, we're like, oh, our sex or gender or, like, women are so great, and we are all those things, but there still exists toxicity within that sphere.
Totally.
And something I feel like people don't always want to talk about.
Yeah, people are scared to talk about it because it's like, I think we still have so far to go in terms of, like, equal rights for women. So, like, why would we waste time talking about women being bad?
Right.
But for me, like, feminism has never been about men versus women.
No. And it shouldn't be. Because that's not what it... Yes.
Totally. And so I think it's, as women, we can fall into the trap of flattening it into this idea of, like, all women are better than all men. And it's like, but actually... there's so much more to think about in terms of, like, race and class and gender within, like, the sex binary that, like, kind of impacts all of that. And so that's kind of what I was thinking about. And also, when I started writing the book, I was in Europe for Fashion Month. It was February 2020.
Okay.
We were hearing...
When you were writing this?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my god. Okay.
So, like, we were hearing news about a virus, and slowly shows were getting canceled, and some people were going home, but it was, like, very unclear what was happening. And then by my last day in Milan, Italy shut down. And I was on one of the last planes out, and then I got to Paris, and in Paris, everyone was like, there's no pandemic here. Like, we don't have pandemics.
Oh my God.
And so one night, I just, like, went down to the hotel bar, and I just I don't even know.
It came out of
I, like, had, like, a cheese plate and a, like, chocolate cake and a glass of wine, and just, like,
Heaven.
Yeah.
Heaven.
Wrote something deranged.
Wow.
But I think, like, the sense of impending doom combined with being around, like, fashion people for a month, like, created something. And it was like, people were saying things like, you know, we were being told that we would have to quarantine for 2 weeks when we got home. And I remember overhearing someone say, like, oh, it's amazing. I'll just, like, starve myself in my apartment for 2 weeks and then, like, I'll come out skinny. Like, that was, like, the conversation.
Oh my God. No.
Yeah, and I was like, it is so interesting to hear what people think about when they think about, like, a major disaster. Right. So then I started thinking about, like, what, like, a breakup would mean, like, what all of these kind of superficial concerns would look like with, like, the stakes up to 100.
Oh my God. Wait, that's crazy.
I
Just
know.
to know, like, the timing of that, and that's when you were writing it.
Yeah. And then I like sent my agent like 40,000 words, and I mean, she was very supportive based on like how messy my draft was, and like really believed in it. And she was like, so a novel needs to be 80,000 words. And
Wow.
so
Okay.
then I went back and, you know, turned it into a book basically.
Well, it's interesting because I think I read in like an interview that like when you were giving this to friends or your editor or whatever, that they were like really interested in the sci-fi part of stuff too, like the world that you were creating, the inside project, and so that you then had to like go back and kind of like fill those parts in more.
Yeah, it had been very kind of like sparse in terms of the details of the world, just because the things that were loudest to me were the interpersonal relationships. And I kind of wanted the sci-fi elements to be like implied.
Okay.
But it turns out that's not how you write a novel.
You're like, no.
Yeah.
So then when you're writing this and you're like creating this world, it's hard enough, I would imagine, to like write about like the present and like have to fill in the blanks. It's like another thing to write about a future world and you're having to like create explanations for why everything exists the way that it does.
Yeah.
So how did you do that as a writer? Did you just ask yourself a million questions about everything?
Yeah, kind of. I read a lot of like science journal articles and like
Did you?
a lot of reports.
Okay.
And what's disturbing about climate change is that like scientists are screaming at the top of their lungs about how bad it's going to be. And so the information about what the world is going to look like if nothing changes is there.
Yeah.
Where I filled in the blanks was what it would mean, you know, to actually live in that world. That was what was missing for me. Because like science can say what the weather is going to be like and what it means for like infrastructure, but in terms of like politics and like socially, what I imagined was if we enter what they call a doom spiral, which is when disasters start happening faster than we can prepare for them, that the first things to go will be like equal rights and like social progress and like, because it's like, you know, when you think about civil rights underneath a climate change apocalypse, like, you know, you just think about like what a government would prioritize.
Like it's survival above all else.
Exactly.
First and foremost.
And so I imagined that, and then I imagined a world where people take advantage of that and where the wealthy are profiting. And so I am...
Well, because they will still.
Yeah, of course.
Like, yeah,
of course they will. And
yeah.
I think that like when people think about like science fiction and like disasters or aliens, there's a tendency to think about it as like the world will unite against this common enemy. But I think the reality is the world will get more fractured than it already is, because I think what people have more than like human loyalty is class loyalty. So
wow. Yeah.
And so especially with climate change, which is something that affects poor people more than rich people.
Yeah.
I imagined like a deepening divide, and then I imagined a feminism that becomes very basic and binary because we've lost so many rights that we've also lost the privilege of having nuanced conversations. And then
so depressing.
Like a reactionary men's rights movement that has gained steam. And then I just tried to think of like the kind of people who would be born out of all of these things. And so that's how I imagined my villain character, who is like a women's rights activist, but like a very limited definition because of like the circumstances.
Wait, there was an interesting thing that I read where some of the people on Goodreads, like the comments were like, why is everybody bi or trans?
Yeah.
Or like, whatever.
Yeah.
What do you say about that?
I mean,
is it annoying to read those reviews though?
Yeah,
honestly?
but it's also on me because I need to stop reading the reviews. At a certain point, like that's the main like place for reader feedback, and it's like I do write for the readers,
of course.
You know, I think some people don't, but like that's not me. Yeah, that's not how I approach my work at all. I don't know. I think it's interesting when people outside of the target demo find the book. And I actually have been very pleasantly surprised by some responses, which will start off being like, I don't understand why everyone in this book is gay, blah, 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 blah. That being said, I liked it.
Yeah.
And when that happens, I'm always like, okay, like,
that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thinking about the future, thinking about that, whatever. Are you concerned about AI and if it's going to take over your job?
Yeah. Are you?
I'm terrified.
Yeah.
Like, even though, like, that was part of our strike last summer, and you feel like it's been paused a little bit for now, it's hard not to think that's going to happen, you know?
I mean, it's so scary on so many levels. Like, it's scary for our jobs. It's scary because of the amount of energy that it's using.
Oh my God,
like,
yeah.
It's so bad for the environment to search on Google, you know?
Totally. God, I don't even feel like anyone's actually ever said that to me when I talk about AI, but like, what a fascinating, very true thing.
Yeah, like the servers or whatever it is.
Right.
I mean, we weren't talking about AI when I started writing Yours for the Taking, and I'm kind of glad because I don't know like what I would have done with it as an idea. But yeah, I mean, I just feel like there are no jobs right now for anybody. Like, and when I'm not writing, I take on like agency, like strategy work, and it's like that used to be really easy to find, and now people are having ChatGPT write their strategies. Like,
I think that's so scary. Yeah. And I think what people who deny the future of AI and are like, no, I think they like forget how exponentially better AI is getting, like, by the second.
I know, it's so scary. I saw someone, and I'm sorry to like quote a tweet to you.
No, I love it. That's the world we live in.
Yeah, someone said something that was like, I want the robots to like do my laundry and wash my dishes so that I can make my art, not make my art so that I can like do my laundry.
Exactly.
I do think that like...
Give me positivity.
Yeah.
Give it to me.
I don't know if it will ever be able to create something that feels like real art.
I love that you're saying that.
Because like the writing is bad.
Yeah. But for now, right? What if it gets better?
But I don't know. I just think like writing needs a soul. And once the robots get souls, they're going to kill us anyway, so who cares?
True. Okay, because you hear about the person who like literally created AI and he's scared for our future.
I know. And I would be so bad in a robot apocalypse.
Like, I wouldn't do well.
Yeah.
I'd be like, take me first.
Same.
I would be like, I can't struggle in this way. Just let me move on.
I'm not built for life on the run.
No, I'm not either. Okay, is this going to be like, I feel like we have a TV show or a movie happening.
Oh my God, do you know anybody?
I want to. I'm like, I see this world. As I was reading it, I was like, oh, I imagine I see the set. I'm like, I get it. I see it. I think I read in an interview somewhere that you said that you would love Sarah Paulson for Jacqueline. And I was like, duh.
Yeah.
I was like, Sarah Paulson, of course.
Yeah. There's a pitch that's being pitched.
Ooh, okay. I'm so excited. Okay, let's let it be a TV show. We're going to put that energy out in the world.
Please.
We're going to see what happens. Maybe you'll give me a co-star in it.
Oh my God.
See.
So I was thinking for you. So.
Oh, all right. Do tell. Production company. Hi. Okay.
So, Shelby's little sister, Camilla,
yes,
is a main character, and she is in her 30s.
I love her.
Yeah, I feel like that would be. And she has your haircut.
Yes. Wait, I'm so excited for this, and you're gonna let me take that book home today.
Oh yeah, I have it for you.
Thank you for doing this.
Oh my God, thank you.
Oh my gosh, this was so fun. I feel like I could like literally say a million more things, but like maybe we'll just do another one after the next book.
That sounds great.
Okay.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you
so much. This is so fun.
Oh, thank you so much for coming over. This was so nice.
This is so fun. I just like love to like barge into people's homes, and I'm always like shocked that people will do it with